flaming chalice is the sign of Unitarian Universalism and is lit in every Unitarian Universalist church at the opening of our worship together. And we will light our chalice today, too. Quinn and Bailey Fowler, Dolph's and Dorothy's grandchildren will light the chalice. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. Hello. Thank you for being here. My name is Tricia Hart. I'm the interim minister of this West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, where Dolph and Dorothy Fowler have been members for more than 40 years. This community, this one right here today, has an important task and privilege in front of you. That is of remembering Dolph and celebrating his life. Some of you knew him very well indeed, for all of your life, or almost all of it, as father, as husband, brother, grandfather, uncle, as colleague perhaps, or fellow teacher, neighbor, member of West Shore, or a friend. And some of you, like me, know Dolph primarily through the stories of those who knew and loved him best. But it is good and right that all of us be here today. Each person in this room holds some part of his story. And in recalling Dolph's life and his many gifts to you and his gifts to the world, you are helping, we are all helping to put those good gifts to good use in our own lives. Because it is hard to do this important work of remembering and celebrating, it is important to do it together. You have a part in this remembering because of the stories you already carry with you. Some of you will share a sample of those memories in a few minutes in this service, but you will also do it later today and tomorrow and for many months and years to come. Because you loved him, your work is to remember him to one another. Today is a celebration of the long and fascinating life of Dolph Fowler. As with any celebration, there will be music and stories, there will be tears and laughter too. It is through all of that, plus love and hope, that the spirit of those we have loved is kept alive among us. And the walls between us can dissolve for a time when we see that the only thing that really matters is love. The words of the Reverend Barbara Peskin: often we are found in our grief and comforted, calmed by some kindness, brought alive again by beauty that catches us undefended. We are held in an embrace invisible but infinite, moving with all creation, between wholeness and fragmentation, moving always toward the one. Small joys and great sorrows pass, and we, with steps uncertain, move on to whatever is next, but continually seen, heard, held by life infinite and remote, intimate and abiding. Love, do not let us go. Would you join me and one another, please, in singing? The hymn is number 21 in your hymnals, the gray hymnals in front of you. It is a song that many of you already know, and I hope you will sing out, For the Beauty of the Earth, number 21. Please rise as you are able. Thank you. As Dorothy and I were considering what reading might make sense, might honor Dolph in this service, Dorothy actually first thought of the poetry of Mary Oliver, who has a way of bringing the natural world's wisdom out and teaching us things that we need to remember in our own lives. The poem that Carolyn Fowler is about to share is called In Blackwater Woods by Mary Oliver. And one of the reasons Dorothy thought it was just right for Dolph is that apparently for a very long time, Dolph was involved in measuring trees for many years and having the unpaid labor of his sons measuring trees at Mammoth Cave National Park for his PhD thesis. It seems a fitting reading. Carolyn, share it with us.
In Blackwater Woods by Mary Oliver. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this. the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go.
Whenever someone who has been a big part of our lives dies, it seems as if a part of us is in danger of being lost as well. We live by our connections with each other. They are quite literally our lifelines. Through the simplest of daily contacts with one another, we find new reasons to get up in the morning, to try our best, to make the world just a little more beautiful. When death comes, it is important to take the time to notice and to celebrate the connections that tie us to everything around us, and our connections to those who are no longer here, but very much alive in our memories and in our hearts. They are a part of us and always remain so. We human beings give each other gifts and teach each other truths just through living our lives as well as we can. It is in learning from one another and applying those lessons in living in our own lives that we grow into the people that we're meant to be. The gift of himself that Dolph shared so generously is still with us, right here in this room, alive in your thoughts and your stories and your memories. I've noticed that people remember everything that's important in life through stories. Think about it. The stories you've known all your life, the stories that that were told to you over and over again. They teach us important stuff. So telling stories at a celebration of a person's life is the right thing to do, and you are the ones who hold those stories. I just met Dolph last summer when he was no longer able to tell me his stories himself. I know just a little from what I've heard, that he grew up in Chicago, that he went to Kenyon, that he studied biology, and then he studied biology education, and then plant ecology. I know that he was basically, fundamentally, every day, all day long, a teacher. I know that he was beloved of his students who happily told stories about the stories that Dolph told. I know that he was a swimmer and a swim coach and a skier and a mountain climber, that he loved all things in nature, that he also apparently liked repairing cars, that he liked airplanes and became a pilot, that he loved to travel. I know that he was devoted to Dorothy, his high school sweetheart, and that they were married for 57 years. I know that he was for many years a dedicated and helpful leader of this congregation, where many, many people counted on his wisdom and also his friendship. And now it is your turn to tell the story. Several members, starting with Dolph's sons and Dorothy, will start this remembering out loud. And then we'll have some time for some of you to remember some little thing that you want to share. I have a microphone and I'm going to walk it around so that you don't have to come all the way up here. And we'll collect those stories until we need to stop and hold the rest for the reception time afterwards. Let us remember and let us celebrate. Carl.
Oh my. So where to begin? What can be said that is not already known? While generally a listener, he did like to tell a story or two when inquiries were made. Kind, gentle soul with an impact measured by example. Quest for knowledge was an ongoing theme. Supportive is an accurate adjective. Almost always had an answer or a response. Rarely stumped. Pursued interests that excited him and allowed for adventure and well-being, while never overbearing. Supported interests of his sons, even secured a motorcycle license and a motorbike to assist with Kurt's cycling training. Made sure we would learn to love and enjoy the sport of downhill skiing. Taught us to swim, but did not force us to swim. Was from the generation who gifted us a pocket knife when we became of a certain age. For myself, answered gracefully when asked why his son was not a strong biology student. He allowed that Kurt and I may have other interests. Enabled independence on many occasions, including when we had to walk home after realizing a missed pickup from the YMCA, where of course we spent time in the footsteps of his youth, or in travels around the country by ourselves, by train or bus. He provided the opportunities to get to know his work, allowing us to visit his academic offices or tag along while he was doing research. Except, just don't ask to actually visit the caves in Mammoth Cave, as time to measure trees was at a premium. He diligently explained how to use the resources of research libraries prior to the internet, and always seemed to have a slide rule in the car for calculations, including one's up-to-date baseball batting average. The instrument in use before electronic calculators was extremely reliable. Fair to say, we were not nature-deprived, even if we went to high school in Cleveland. Many a state park, historic site, and scenic coastline were visited at his initiative. Later, these trips include visits to the local water treatment plants, just to make sure we were aware of what happens with the water we rely on for our life. He provided us with a flotilla of boats growing up, all requiring human power. But like the sport of cycling, this allowed for a closer connection with the environment and time spent with him. He passed on a love for photography to us, gifting us our initial cameras. We remained far behind his prodigious output, however. Remained a man of few words, but would address issues of the day when asked. Remained true to form later in life, when I routinely gifted him very heavy, i.e. long in page length, books on science-related subject matter. And without fail, he would thank me on the next visit, having made it through the text. On a personal note, he was the one who introduced excellent jazz music to his sons, favoring, among others, the likes of Ahmad Jamal, who actually performed here at West Shore, and the late Dave Brubeck. The most repeated anecdotes for me include approaching me in the basement of our house after everyone had gone to bed on the night of my high school graduation, noticing that I was finally reading my high school diploma. He then stated, "Not bad for a certificate of attendance." My other is when making the long drive to New York City to start college, parking along the curb near West 114th and Broadway, and assisting with getting my possessions out of the car. Came up and shook my hand and firmly stated, "I think you can handle it from here." At that time, I went on with the thought that he really did want to visit the New York Botanical Gardens before heading back. But of course, I understood his mannerisms when I had the opportunity to drop off my daughter at school just a few years later. Later in his life, when his mental and physical decline became more apparent, was apparent to all. Fortunately, he remained able to travel, not straying too far from Mom during those trips. We did have the opportunity to ski one or two memorable last times, and on each passing visit, he retained his amicable disposition and possessed a twinkle in his eye. All of his traits from all periods of life survive in some manner in my brother and I. Well, except for maybe the car gene for me. And are being passed on to his grandchildren, which is truly the greatest gift of all. That's what I want to share and say thank you for coming. Please do stay. Thank you.
Dolph Fowler, a selfless father, a confidence-building teacher, an intellectually curious problem solver. In so many ways, he was a guy one would want to have as their father. No matter what our interests, he always supported us, including when those interests involved things in which he had no experience or background. At 12, I started cycling essentially every day and somehow discovered the Lorraine Wheelmen, a cycling club of mainly 35 to 55-year-old men who rode on Sunday mornings 50-plus mile loops on the flatlands of Lorain County. At the time, my dad wasn't at all interested in cycling, yet he found it in himself to drive me the half hour or so to the 8 o'clock Sunday morning starting point. Now, this wasn't like today's parents driving their kids to travel, soccer, or dance. In bicycle touring, there isn't a grandstand where you can watch your child grow up and watch them mature and get better and better at their task. It's pretty boring to be a parent of a cyclist that wants to do this kind of riding. He selflessly took me to where I needed to go, and to the best of my knowledge, Dad either talked to the person at the Dunkin' Donuts counter or simply engrossed himself in one of the hundreds of books that he was interested in at the time, until the group returned from the ride many, many hours later. Soon, my cycling interest matured towards racing, which meant driving out to weeknight training rides and races throughout the country. As a way to spend more time together, Dad got more involved in the sport. Ultimately, he became a nationally certified cycling referee, where he'd often be seen on the back of motorcycles, officiating at bicycle races, or managing the scoring for group finishes and sprints. Ironically, he became so involved in refereeing, we often ended up traveling separately to those bike races, as he was obligated to spend the entire day from dawn till dusk, and I would often venture off to another venue for an additional race on the same weekend. Dad ultimately took up cycling himself well after I retired from bicycle racing, and you'll find many times that he enjoyed casual touring rides, multi-day tours with my brother and friends around that he had met through the sport. For me, bikes led to an interest in cars, first as transportation to bike races, but later as a hobby. Just before turning 16, my dad said I could buy an ailing 1967 Dodge Dart for $50 that a friend of mine had for sale. The previous owner had given up trying to fix a flat tire after breaking off a wheel stud while attempting to remove the wheel. Well, Dad was never afraid of finding the right tool for the job. So when we went to pick up the car, he brought along a 5-foot pipe to put on the end of the breaker bar to get extra leverage to get the wheel off. For Dad, everything was a learning opportunity, and no matter the student or the audience, he never talked down to anyone. Therefore, he taught me to calculate how many foot-pounds of torque his 200 pounds of mass would be at the 5-foot end of the pipe. That's 1,000 foot-pounds for you liberal arts majors. For better or worse, that nut didn't budge. Standing on that pipe broke off another of those of the wheel studs. If you didn't catch that, 1,000 foot-pounds is too much for a wheel stud. He immediately knew what happened, but he gave me the broken pieces and told me to figure out why the stud failed. In about 5 minutes, I realized the threads turned the wrong way. And then I learned that 60s era Chryslers used left-hand thread on the left side wheels under the assumption that it would help maintain lug nut torque. It doesn't, by the way. The remaining 3 nuts removed quite easily, but we had to go righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. Dad helped me diagnose other problems in his usual style, building my confidence by asking me questions so I could figure out the solution myself, rather than giving me the answers. With a $5 ground strap and a $3 tire plug, I had a $57 car, of which I was considerably more proud than my prep school peers were of their newer, fancier cars that they were given. A few years later, I took over a Mitsubishi economy car my mother had driven since new, but at 120,000 miles was in need of engine work before my dad considered it reliable enough for me. Dad had me call around to junkyards to find a replacement engine, and over the next few weekends, we swapped the bad motor for the new junkyard motor. As far as I knew, he hadn't done this before, but by sharing with me his intellectual curiosity and his attitude that we can figure this out on our own, we both gained immense personal satisfaction. From that point on, I had the confidence to tackle my own challenges. Later in life, my hobbies evolved to teaching high-performance driving and working on race cars and such. Just as my dad had done with me, I encouraged my students and friends to figure out the problems themselves, and we ended up teaching each other new things. I hadn't really realized it until my father passed. But that desire to share knowledge and to teach in an experiential way clearly came from my dad. I hope these stories show how great a father my dad was. He was incredibly generous with his time, engaged with us in our favorite hobbies, gave us the confidence to take on challenges ourselves, and taught us to share our passions with others.
I want to explain the leis that the family females are wearing. My brother lives in Hawaii, and his whole family is in Hawaii, and they wanted to come, but a graduation prohibited them from being here, and so they sent these lovely leis so that we could wear them and remember the family in Hawaii. I want to start by thanking the caregivers who took care of Dolph at the end of his life with Alzheimer's disease. Many of you are from the church. Sandra Belknap, his longtime caregiver, I hope is here. Sam Hughes, Mary Jo Maish, Kathleen Strauser, Charlie Farrell, Jerry Devis, Catherine Campbell-Gaston, Holly Osborne, Grady Myers, Becky Vallow, and many more. And some of you are here from our Alzheimer's group, which morphed into Charlie's Arts Experience group too. Yvette Schmitz was Dolph's trainer. With the whole group from the Alzheimer's Association and the volunteers from Charlie's group and the others not mentioned by name, please stand up and would you give them all a hand? As the saying goes, it takes a village. In the case of Alzheimer's, it takes a community. Dolph was indeed a Renaissance man, and Tim, I didn't mean to forget you. Would you stand up too, please? Our neighbor who came every night to help put Dolph to bed for years. He was indeed a Renaissance man, as many of you have said in your kind notes and cards. We, mostly Carl, purposefully wrote a rather extensive obituary so that many of you could know more about this remarkable man. Many of you here have known Dolph for more than 40 years, and some for a year or two. I knew him in high school, and we dated about 5 years before getting married, a marriage that lasted 57 years. A secret of a successful marriage is respect and letting the other person fly. He was always the cleaning, cooking, helpful spouse before it was socially fashionable, and a marvelous father. Dolph came from strong German stock, the son of a doctor, the highest-ranking American in the Burma theater in World War II, and a respected dietitian who held many top positions in hospitals and professional associations. A few stories about his life that are not covered in the obituary. As the boys said, Dolph loved photography and bird watching. When we lived in Oregon, we'd like to go to the refuge and take pictures of birds because they were coming through on the flyway. It was cheap and fun entertainment. He had a Nikon, one of those with that huge long lens, and he had it mounted on a rifle barrel because it was easier to steady it. A ranger came up to us really fast in his car. You know the rest of the story. He thought we were shooting illegally, only to learn we were shooting with a camera. Dolph loved his Coast Guard auxiliary activities, often combining them with his flying. He especially enjoyed being called up at 3 a.m. in the morning, finding an observer at that time, and being ready to fly off at first light from the Lorain County Regional Airport in his beloved Cessna N874 X-ray to help the Coast Guard with a rescue mission, or to take photographs of pollution spewing from wherever into our streams, or to find contraband coming from Canada in pretend fishing boats. We loved our summer at Crater Lake National Park, skiing on the 4th of July in our bathing suits, and watching twin fawns browse by our trailer. He loved nature, plants, trees, all of it. Most of all, Dolph loved teaching. Students from his first high school teaching job in Klamath Falls, Oregon, in 1960, found out that he died. How is that possible? And sent a wonderful note about how fine a teacher he was. Students from Brookside High School commented on his abilities. 1, Doc was one of the pivotal inspirations in my life. More than anyone to that point, he taught me to think, using the scientific method to approach problems conceptually. I've since gotten a PhD in ecology, as Dolph had, work at a university researching how humans affect ecosystems and alter them, but he also meant more to me than just as a science mentor. I remember fondly how he took me up in his plane, my first time in a plane after a sheltered life in Sheffield Lake. Upon touching down hard and taking back off again for a go-around, he gruffly remarked, "I hope I didn't break the landing gear," which terrified me. He also sold me his canoe. I finally found out what happened to it, for almost nothing, which I still have and use, and which has helped me to ignite a love, of paddling and canoe racing. He's also the reason I still love Porsche cars. From the class of 1991, he didn't like me to go by the diminutive version of my name. It was symbolic for not selling myself short of my potential. He graded us on our potential and contributed to my success as a nurse and curiosity for critical thinking. Blue shirt, coffee brewing on the Bunsen burner, deep booming voice, and giant smile are all flashing memories of Doc. That's what they called him. After 25 years, he left a lasting impression on me. He drove me to OU in the red Porsche to take a scholarship test and flew my class in the Piper Cub. I think it was probably not the Piper Cub, but it could have been a rental, at the Lorain County Airport. His teaching style was memorable, as he never talked down to students and inspired them to reach new heights. You could say he was easily distracted, as we often got off topic in class. But in retrospect, I believe he thought it more important to educate from a holistic approach, where curiosity and lifelong learning trumped the science topic of the day. He inspired me to become an engineer, and more importantly, he taught me to be curious and reach new heights. And from colleagues, I worked with Dolph at Brookside for many years, brilliant, passionate, and a kind man. It was a pleasure to know and work with him, and he was a STEM teacher before STEM even was a popular term. Dolph has an extensive tie collection, often reflecting his hobbies. Thus, you will see some of these in Baker Hall at the reception. They're around the vases of the flowers. He enjoyed having a different tie for his students to comment on every day. So at the end of the day, he threw them in the back of the car. So our car was always full of ties. Dolph loved to read to his students. I found a passage in the book, Linus Pauling in his own words, which I'm sure he liked. I shall give you a word of advice about how to behave toward your elders. This is Linus Pauling, quote. When an old and distinguished person speaks to you, listen to him carefully and with respect, but do not believe him. Never put your trust in anything but your own intellect. Your elder, no matter whether he has gray hair or has lost his hair, no matter whether he's a Nobel laureate, may be wrong. The world progresses year by year, century by century, as the members of the younger generation find out what was wrong among the things that their elders said. So you must always be skeptical. Always think for yourself. Dolph combined his student instruction with his skiing and met the classes at Boston Mills with his not-to-be-missed chartreuse helmet and flashing NASA pin. He loved teaching wherever he was. Even just talking to my Cleveland International Program adult groups, I found them once all sitting at his feet in our living room, absorbing whatever he had to say. Another comment. As a fellow ski instructor of 30-plus years, I'd known Dolph through his ski teaching career. We had many discussions about the mechanics of skiing. He really had a passion for the sport and in teaching it to others, too. So we had quite a bit to share: cars, cycling, flying, and science. I'll miss him, as will we all. He was really one in a million. That indeed he was. Thank you for coming. We'll see you more in Baker Hall.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I am AIDS. He's aid to me. He's Dolph maybe to you, but he's aid to me. I'm 20 months younger than my brother. And Aid, of course, is a shortening for Adolf, and he was always aid to me. Of course, aid has other meanings, and aid can also mean that he helps. And so how does he help? Well, he can help you get into trouble, and he can help you get out of trouble. And my dad, you know, he came back from the war in '45, and the next Flag Day, this is, Aid must have been in 3rd grade, and I was in 1st grade. He told my dad that it's not a school day. It's, you know, we're free to stay home. Well, of course, Dad started driving around to work and so on. He saw the kids in the play yards and came to the conclusion that it really wasn't a day off for students. So he came home and he said, well, you boys, you've got a choice. You can either have a spanking and go out and play, or else you can go upstairs in your rooms and read for a week. This is a sort of a unique way of getting kids to really love to read, because we both opted for the reading. Then, you know, when we were in high school, another thing that we did that was kind of fun, we walked home, you know, from school. We always walked. And we went down Blackstone, and there was this 1929 Lincoln, well, it was kind of like a gangster car. It was, you know, with a place for a chauffeur and window in between and jump seats in the back. It was quite a car. And so the thing was for sale for $300. And between the two of us, we bought it. And Dad, of course, was, you know, he allowed us to do these kind of things. And we used to drive it about, and God, once I remember we went out in the country with it, and the darn thing, he got it up to going about 65 miles an hour, and we got home, and you know, it had wooden spokes for the tires, and you couldn't get new tires for it, and one of the things, the rubber had come off so you could see the rope kind of string support for the tire, and so, well, once again, we lucked out, you know. And one other thing I can remember, too, that we did that, you know, my dad was really free and my mom was really free in what we were able to do. my grandparents had had a small cottage in Frankfort, Illinois, which was sort of outside of Chicago, a small, at that time, a small village. And so we would go out there sometimes, and there was this big cottonwood tree there. And for whatever reason, and that's gone in my memory, we decided we were going to cut down that big tree. And so we borrowed this chainsaw, and it had a 4-cycle motor on it. It was a huge motor, and of course neither of us had ever used a chainsaw before. So what the heck, we're going to give it a shot. And so we get to it, and then we tried to start this thing, and we couldn't figure it out. We weren't able to do that, which was perhaps really a good thing. But that didn't stop us, because we had also had a 2-man crosscut saw. So we went to work on this tree, and we got it figured out where to make the darn thing fall and all that. And ultimately, we cut it down, and it went down with a big crash because it was a big tree. But the thing was, as we then looked at where it fell, about 2 feet away was the power line to the house, and we said, well, we lucked out again, So, you think back on all that, and there are many things that really helped me, and some advice on how to study and what to study and how to get along in college and so on. And then, of course, as I was listening to everybody talk, there's a lot that, he's done that I'm unaware of. I live in northeast Wisconsin, and so it's really wonderful to hear everything that was said about him and to learn again a lot that I've missed. And again, the distances, my advice to Bob and John and you folks, don't get far apart. Don't go far apart. Stay in the same state at least, And that's advice to anybody else who has kids. But anyway, I'm really glad that I came and had a chance to meet with some of you, and it was kind of fun to talk about my brother.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Alice Newman Mulberry. I've known Dorothy Anderson Fowler since we were both first graders at William H. Ray Elementary School in Chicago. We went all through elementary school together and then entered Hyde Park High School together. In high school, we walked the mile or so between our houses, back and forth to Hyde Park every day with other close friends from Ray Elementary. It was at Hyde Park High that Dorothy met Adolph Fowler, who was a member of the swim team and the ROTC and an avid tennis player. He soon became her high school boyfriend. At the end of our senior year, we double dated for the senior prom. At the beginning of our senior year in college, Adolph invited our little group of girlfriends to a Labor Day picnic in the backyard of his family home. After we'd all been together for a while, Adolph called us to order and commented on how unobservant we all had been. He pointed out that Dorothy was wearing a wedding ring. She and Adolph had been married the day before in the parlor of her parents' home, and she was now planning to transfer from Illinois Wesleyan, where she had spent the first 3 years of college, to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, so she could be with him. So Dorothy became the first of our little group, who had been together since kindergarten and first grade, to get married. Dorothy and Dolph were married in September 1959. In July 1966, my husband and I got married while the Fowlers were living with their 2 very young sons in Klamath Falls, Oregon. They were unable to attend our wedding, so on our honeymoon, we paid them a visit, which included a visit to Crater Lake National Park, where Adolph was serving as a park ranger. This proved to be the first in a series of overnight visits which my husband Jay Mulberry and I have exchanged over the years with Dorothy and Dolph. After Klamath Falls, there was Terre Haute, Indiana, while Adolph was in grad school. Eventually, there were many pleasant visits to the beautiful, spacious house in Olmsted. Originally, when the Fowlers would come to Chicago, Adolph would pilot his own plane to a suburban airport, and they would come the rest of the way to Chicago by train or car. In recent years, when Adolph could no longer fly, Dolph and Dorothy would take the Begabus from Cleveland to downtown Chicago. I might mention that the last time Jay and I, or the first and last time Jay and I were in this building, was for the Fowlers' Golden Wedding. It was a real shock when Adolph was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He seemed to have done all the right things to avoid it. He was a ski instructor, a member of the ski patrol, a cyclist, a photographer, a member of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, and interested in a wide variety of subjects. As a retired teacher, I can imagine that he must have been a creative and stimulating science teacher for his students. We had many lively conversations with him over the years, and shall miss him very much. In conclusion, I should like to say to Dorothy that I bring sympathy and expressions of love and support from not only our small group of close friends, but also from other members of HP 56 who met in Chicago recently.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shirley, and I was a colleague of Doc's. That's what we called him at Brookside.
Close.
Okay, thank you. Doc and I had the privilege, I had the privilege of working with Doc for many years. I remember about maybe 20 years ago, the two of us were invited to participate in a special study at NASA, and we were really excited about it, especially Doc. We were given these bulky handheld objects that took 8 batteries to work. They were the very first original Garmin GPS units. And we were working on developing curriculum for schools using GPS, or trying to help NASA come up with bright ideas of how people could really use GPS. I didn't see a lot of value in it. Of course, I did use it today to get here, but back then, Doc said, everyone will have this in their car. And I couldn't imagine why they would need it. I used to teach them how to read maps, after all. Why couldn't they just read maps? But there we have it. So yes, even 20 years or so ago, Doc could see the value in something that was brand new and nobody else even knew about, and yet he could foresee how it would be used. So thanks, Doc, and thanks for putting some time and effort into GPS for us all, so we could get here today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Heck. About 9 or 10 years ago, Dorothy hosted a retirement party for Dr. was it Robert White? He was a very esteemed radiologist and professor, and we were lucky enough to be invited. And there was probably, 100 people or so. In a small group of about 7 or 8 people, where my stepmother Shirley and I were, I was looking over Dr. White's CV, and I said, oh my gosh, he must be the smartest person I've ever met. Dolph was in the group, Dorothy was not. And he said, my wife's the smartest person I ever met. So we were all just stood in awe at the love and respect he had for his wife.
It's a great story. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ann Caruso. I'm in the West Shore Fact Group that Dorothy and Dolph are or were members of. I just want to say, sort of in the same vein, when Dolph talked about his children, he was so proud of them. But he also always included how proud he was of his daughters-in-law. And that struck me, because not just once, but a few times when he talked about his children, he always talked about how much he loved and was grateful for his daughters-in-law.
My name is Jan Williams, and I've known Dolph for a few years, but I guess to start this off is to talk about Dorothy and her commitment to the anti-fracking movement. Many of you have heard about how active she is. And what I was going to bring up about Dolph is about 3 years ago, there was the first DC march against fracking. And a bunch of people from West Shore and actually from several different church communities around here went. Dolph and Dorothy went. Dolph went because Dorothy went, because it was so important to Dorothy. I thought it was great. He marched, he walked in the march, and he was just a sweaty, terrible. It was July, it was warm time in DC. And he was terribly sweaty, but he made the march. And it was important to him, and he did it. So that's my story.
Thank you.
Even if you never knew Dolph, if you knew Dorothy, you would have to think he must have been a great guy to deserve someone like her who took care of him so well all the way till the end.
Thank you, Gary.
My name is Soren Hansen, and I've known Dolph for 40 years. I knew the two kids when they were 10 years old, or approximately, because we joined the Fowler family. I want to talk about two things because there are, of course, a lot more that we could talk about. But one of the first things that Dolph and I had and shared in common was our interest in the environment. He had an environmental science, and I was in environmental engineering. We had a lot of conversations that I realize in retrospect now really form my commitment to sustainability. He was in favor of sustainability before it even became something that we now know something about. And if you don't know anything about it, let me just give you a little plug. We have to have 3 different issues that have to act in harmony: people, planet, and profit. And that's what sustainability is all about. And one of the things that I remember most about Dolph was when we would go out on trips to one of our wonderful metro parks. And I have to disagree with Carl because one of the funny things that I thought that Dolph had was this quirk of telling you and going on and on and on about everything he wanted to tell us. You all remember, I think, that. And that reminds me, we went out on these trips because we were part of something called an extended family. People who are not members of a Unitarian Universalist church may not know what an extended family is, but they're families that are created by people whose families are far away from where we are in a church. And when we arrived here 40 years ago, there was already a family that needed some additional 10-year-olds, and that was our kids 40 years ago. And we became members of what is then and still is called the Fowler family. And we've been meeting for 40 years, and 3 years prior to that, every month or so, people have died, and then we've added other younger members to the extended family. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to Dorothy about is how important that was, and to see children growing up in extended families. It's not just the Fowler family, but many other families. It's been a wonderful experience for our family as well. One of the things I wanted to point out, we have this wonderful symbol of the yin and yang, which people think are opposites, but really they're complementary, yin and yang. And I wanted to say Dorothy is the yang part of that, because she's the one with the ideas and she wants to make things happen. Dolph is the complement to that. He is the grounded person that made everything work. He was the patriarch, and Dorothy was the matriarch. I don't know what we're going to do without him. He had such deep wisdom that I'm still building on.
So I'm imagining that if we could see all of the memories and the stories that are in this room right now, it would be a big, swirling, beautiful mixture of things. And what I want you to do is to bring all of your memories with you right after the service down to Baker Hall and find somebody that you need to tell your story to. And we'll just imagine that we'll take that big cloud of memories down with us. Not because that's the last opportunity, but because that's the best way we can continue this celebration. And so we are arrived in this moment of sadness and gratitude, facing one another in the light, aware too of the shadows of loss. Here we are asked once again to measure our courage against the pain of grief, once again to accept with open heart the joy of life well loved, the blessing of love, and the pain of loss remembered. Today, we know that life, sweet and precious and difficult, is a gift given us only for a time, not ours to hold forever, but to be lived in each moment with beauty and passion. Let us sing one more time together. The hymn is also in your gray hymnal, number 44. We sing of golden mornings. Please stand as you are able. And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality. So may it be.